is the greatest fear of the free folk of Middle-earth, the very thing the wise know they must prevent at all costs. Separated for over 3,000 years, the reunion of the Dark Lord and his greatest creation would spell certain doom. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover what would happen if Sauron reclaimed the One Ring. The way this would play out is largely determined by when Sauron reclaims the ring. Today, I'm going with what I think would be one of the most likely scenarios, as Frodo and Sam are at the cracks of doom. Whether by Gollum not slipping into the fires, or by Gollum not being shown mercy moments earlier by Sam, one of these little folk claims the ring for their own, falling to the power of the One. With no eucatastrophe moment, the Nazgul who are sent by Sauron with all speed to Orodruin arrive and kill the ring-bearer. With the Witch King's earlier demise at the hands of Éowyn, Khamûl now leads the Nazgul back to Barad-dur, finally reuniting the Dark Lord with his master ring. Sauron, who is not a flaming eye, but very much in physical form, places the One Ring on one of his 9 remaining fingers. In that very instant, Elrond, Galadriel, and Gandalf know the worst has come to pass. They remove their rings, and with a look at Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Pippin, and the others, Gandalf knows in his heart that all is now lost. The armies of Sauron utterly destroy the men of the West in the Battle of the Morannon. The armies of Gondor and Rohan are wiped out, and Gandalf dies his second bodily death as his spirit is taken away to the uttermost west. The only ones capable of escape are some of the eagles, one of whom delivers the grim news to those remaining in Minas Tirith. Naturally, our thoughts now turn to what Sauron's offensive strategy would be, following his reclamation of the One Ring. However, this would have much more immediate and tragic effects in the north. As of this date of March 25, 3019, Galadriel and her people have repelled attacks from Dol Guldur 3 times, thanks in part to the power of her ring. Further north, the dwarves of Erebor and the men of Dale are facing overwhelming odds against the armies of the Easterlings, laying siege to their lands. In the actual story, it is due to the destruction of the ring that Sauron's forces lose heart, and many throughout Middle-earth are freed from his shadow. This leads to the rally of the men and dwarves to victory, and the elves of Lorien and Mirkwood to destroy Dol Guldur. With the One Ring not only still around, but in the possession of its master, the dwarves and men are conquered by the Easterlings, and the elves are unable to defeat and destroy the forces of Dol Guldur. At this point, Sauron's enemies are either conquered, militarily decimated, or far less defensible, all simply due to his reclaiming the ring. While I believe Sauron would indeed move against the perceived threats, it would take some time. We must keep in mind that the force that has defeated Gandalf and Aragorn at the Morannon is pretty much the last of his army after the massive defeat at Minas Tirith. It will no doubt take some time for Sauron to further build up his army of orcs, trolls, and men. In the coming years, Sauron's power grows, and word comes to places like Lorien and Rivendell that the lands of Rhovanion are overrun with orcs and Easterlings loyal to Sauron. Galadriel and Elrond would have set aside their rings of power, knowing they would only serve to reveal their location and possibly betray their thoughts to Sauron. Now in possession of the Ring of Fire, which had belonged to Gandalf, Sauron is able to twist its power of rekindling hearts to draw more men in both the east and south under his banner. After years of preparation, Sauron finally makes his move against the remaining free folk. His southern army lays siege to Minas Tirith, and despite the valiant efforts of Faramir, Éowyn, and Merry, the city is taken by Sauron's vastly superior forces. Meanwhile, the Northern Army, having been reinforced by both the East and potentially the South, launches attacks on Rivendell and Lorien. However, they arrive at the Elven realms to find them empty. Elrond, Galadriel, and the elves of Middle-earth are long gone, having sailed into the west in the preceding years. While not wearing them, they take with them the 2 remaining elven rings. Knowing that victory against the Dark Lord and his ring by this time in history was impossible, they would take Vilya and Nenya to the west to keep them from falling into Sauron's hands. For if he were to claim all 3 elven rings, he could potentially create 3 great realms, staving off the decays of time and becoming virtually unassailable to any who would oppose him. As it is, Sauron now controls the vast majority of Middle-earth. As to his strategy for rule, we get a clue in the Return of the King from the mouth of Sauron. "These are the terms," said the messenger, and smiled as he eyed them one by one. "The rabble of Gondor and its deluded allies shall withdraw at once beyond the Anduin, first taking oaths never again to assail Sauron the Great in arms, open or secret. All lands east of the Anduin shall be Sauron's forever solely. West of the Anduin, as far as the Misty Mountains and the Gap of Rohan, shall be tributary to Mordor. And men there shall bear no weapons, but shall have leave to govern their own affairs. But they shall help to rebuild Isengard, which they have wantonly destroyed, and that shall be Sauron's, and there his lieutenant shall dwell. Not Saruman, but one more worthy of trust." With 2 great armies at his command, Sauron sets up faithful servants as rulers in key locations throughout Middle-earth. The mouth of Sauron is placed, as he predicted, at Isengard, controlling the important Gap of Rohan. Rohan itself is too small and remote to warrant a large-scale occupation, but the men of the East, who had a history of attacks on these lands, are gifted the realm to occupy in tributary to Mordor. Khamul, now the Lord of the Nazgul, is placed as ruler of Gondor, a realm where people will live in fear of the one who replaces the Morgul Lord. If it is true that Sauron himself had possessed the 9 rings of men, then perhaps he would enslave one among his followers to be the new 9th Nazgul, ruling over an area such as Rivendell or Dale. With both his Master Ring and the Ring of Fire of the Elves, Sauron's fortress of Barad-dur and the lands of Mordor become virtually unassailable. The decays of time are staved off for this Maya, who would otherwise be tied to the waning of the world. In the north, Saruman has taken over the Shire as Sharky. The lands here would go from bad to worse, as Saruman's treachery would not go unpunished. Yet, having been cast from the Order of the Istari, Saruman is no match for any sizable force thrown at him, and he still finds his end in the very lands of Hobbiton. The question now comes, what is Sauron's end goal? For insight, let's look to Tolkien's letter number 183. Sauron desired to be a god king. He was thrice involved in treachery. First, admiring strength, he had followed Morgoth and become his chief agent in Middle-earth. Second, when Morgoth fell, he forsook his allegiance, but from fear only, and remained in Middle-earth. Third, seeing how his knowledge was greatly admired, and how easy it was to influence other rational creatures, he reassumed the position of Morgoth's representative in the Second Age. By the end of the Third Age, although actually weaker than before, he claimed in his pride to be Morgoth returned. If victorious, he would have demanded divine honor and absolute temporal power over all. Contrary to what many may believe, Sauron seeks not to destroy all the lands, but to cover them in his shadow, that the peoples of Middle-earth would submit to his rule, worshipping him as a god-king, as some Easterlings had in days of old. As he claims to be Morgoth returned, among the mightiest of the Valar, will the rule of Middle-earth be enough? Or will Sauron eventually look to the west with greater ambitions? Would Eru intervene, perhaps destroying all the world and bringing about the end of days and the second music of the Ainur? With the lands covered in a second darkness, a cloaked traveler makes his way toward the east, hoping that his two remaining kin may yet be alive. His allies, the Beornings, have retreated to find refuge in the Misty Mountains. Once described by Gandalf as a master of shapes and changes of hue, Radagast the Brown travels in disguise. He makes his way east in hopes of finding the Blue Wizards and any resistance that may yet remain. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil 19, Listen Me the Cinda, Mandu Pandu, Andrew Carlisle, The Mighty Mim, Sky Carcass, Slidebelts, Dane Ragnarsson, Salim Rahman, Zetrock, Berto Berg, Grand Strategy Nerd, Graham Darricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Michael Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description and purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings. The year is 3021. Saruman rules over the Shire before his eventual demise. A lone hobbit makes his way home to find it destroyed. For years he has journeyed, his life spared at the very cracks of Mount Doom, for to the new lord of the Nazgul, he had seemed not worth the trouble of slaying. Samwise Gamgee returns in despair to his beloved home, and instead finds a raging fire awakening in his heart.